I stood frozen right in front of the bedroom door. A warm yellow light spilled through the crack, and inside, a faint laugh was abruptly cut off as I turned the doorknob. Tom was sitting there, his shirt buttons undone, panic etched across his face. And from behind the curtain, a chestnut-colored dress peeked out. I heard my own trembling voice echo in the once familiar room that suddenly felt foreign. "Who isn't here?" Tom stammered, clinging to the last trace of composure. "There's no one, Grace. You're just imagining things." But Grace Miller, the wife bound to him for nearly 30 years of marriage, attuned to every breath he took, knew I was not mistaken. I yanked the curtain open. Vanessa stepped out, her face drained of color, lips still trembling from being caught. The wedding ring slipped from my hand, hitting the floor, rolling once, and stopping right at her feet. That tiny sound echoed in my head like a death knell for decades of trust and endurance. In that instant, I understood. The family I had guarded, nurtured, and sacrificed my youth to build was standing at the edge of collapse. And from that moment on, I was no longer just a betrayed wife. I would be the one to tell this story, so you could witness the journey of a woman reclaiming herself amid betrayal and ruin. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I'd be so happy to connect with you. I unlocked the back door with the familiar key, my head still carrying the smell of disinfectant and the hum of ventilators from the night shift. At the hospital, usually, the moment I step inside is the moment I can finally breathe. This place is quiet, still holding the faint scent of yesterday's coffee and a trace of basil from the candle Emma left on the counter. But today, as soon as I shut the door behind me, I froze. A strange perfume rushed at me, sharp and sugary, like someone had uncapped a bottle of syrup and poured it into the air. It clung to my throat, heavier than any smell I'd ever brought home from the hospital. I never used that kind of perfume. Emma was allergic to strong scents. No one in this house would ever choose something like that. I stood still for a few seconds, hearing my heart pounding in my chest. My mind scrambled for a reasonable explanation. Maybe someone had dropped by, or Tom had bought a gift to test out. But then my eyes landed on the kitchen table, a half-full glass of red wine. The dim morning light streamed through the curtains, glinting off the rim of the glass to reveal a faint lipstick stain. A pale pink shade, not mine. I hadn't touched lipstick in months, and I had no reason to. I set my nurse's bag on the chair, my palms turning cold, sweat sticking to the handles. It's the small details that suffocate you. I remembered my mother once telling me, "Grace, sometimes a woman doesn't need to catch someone in the act. Just noticing the things that don't fit into daily life is enough to understand." I was 16 when she said that, after catching my father coming home late with a tie that wasn't his. Now her words rang in my mind, sharp as scissors slicing through fabric. "You're home?" Tom's voice called from the living room. I flinched. His footsteps were steady, unhurried, betraying nothing unusual. He appeared in the doorway, hair tousled, shirt untucked, looking as if he'd been working all night. I looked at him, then back at the wine glass. "Did you have company?" I asked, forcing my voice to sound calm. Tom hesitated for a beat, then gave a small smile. "Oh, just a colleague. They dropped by to discuss some work. You know, the second-floor renovation projects at the firm. I only entertained them for a while before they left." "Colleague," I repeated, my eyes fixed on the lipstick stain. "When did they leave?" "Around midnight, maybe." He scratched his chin, avoiding my gaze. "You know how my schedule is. Clients, deadlines, always unpredictable." I nodded to let it pass, but inside, I couldn't swallow it. I picked up the glass, the bitter smell of grapes mixing with the amber perfume, making me want to gag. Tom stepped closer, reaching out as if to take the glass. "Let me clean that up. You look exhausted. You should rest." I drew my hand back slightly, keeping the glass in my sight. I looked straight into his eyes. In those brown eyes, I once found the warmth of a home. Today, I found only evasion. He turned to the fridge, pretending to rummage through food. The clatter of plastic trays against each other as flimsy as a paper-thin disguise. In that moment, I knew something had shifted. Our home had never smelled of such perfume, nor had there ever been a strange lipstick mark on a glass. And I, a nurse accustomed to noticing the smallest wound to diagnose a patient's condition, understood that these signs were not coincidences. I set the wine glass back on the table, so slowly I could hear the glass touch the wood. "Yeah, I must really be tired," I said, turning toward the staircase. But each step felt heavy as lead, while in my mind a voice whispered, "Grace, something isn't right." Upstairs, I changed out of my scrubs and stood in front of the mirror. The reflection staring back was a 54-year-old woman, hair tied hastily, eyes sunken from lack of sleep. But what unsettled me most wasn't the wrinkles or the dark circles, it was the sense that someone had passed through my space and left their trace behind. I took a deep breath, telling myself, "Grace, maybe you're being too sensitive. Maybe it really was just a colleague." But since when did I have to coax myself into believing my husband the way I'd coax a patient about to hide pills in his pocket? Tom called up from downstairs. "I'm heading to work. Get some rest. My curt reply echoed in the empty room, lonely as the drop of a pin. The door shut. The engine started. I listened until the sound of his car faded into silence. The house was still, so still that each beat of my heart felt like knocking against the wooden walls. I went back down to the kitchen. The perfume lingered, not as strong as when I first entered, but still floating in the air, clinging to the grain of the wood and the folds of the curtains. I opened the window to let it out, and the morning breeze rushed in with the smell of wet grass. So much easier to bear. I cleared the table. The wine glass made my hand tremble, as though it might shatter into 100 shards like the fragments of trust I was struggling to hold together. I placed it in the sink, ran water over it. The pale lipstick dissolved, smearing into a faint stain like evidence being washed away. Then my eyes caught on the red and white checkered kitchen towel, the one I usually used to dry my hands while cooking dinner. I remembered washing it yesterday, folding it neatly into the drawer. And yet now, it hung carelessly over the steel sink, its edge still damp. I picked it up, and that was when my heart skipped. On the white threads, caught in the fabric, was a single long chestnut strand of hair, glowing brown in the sunlight. Too long, too smooth, too unfamiliar to belong to me. My hair was cropped to my shoulders and streaked with gray. Emma's was blonde. Ruth, my friend, had gray hair. No one in this house had chestnut hair like that. I stood still, the delicate strand weighing on me like a stone. My thoughts spun. I remembered once catching Tom's lingering glance at a young employee during a company party. I had told myself, "It's just politeness, Grace. Men are like that sometimes." I had brushed it aside. But now, this strand of hair felt like the answer to every suspicion I had ever pushed away. I set the towel down on the table, bracing my hands against the wood to steady my trembling. My heart pounded wildly. I remembered the early years of our marriage, when Tom and I lived in a tiny apartment with only one dining table and 2 chairs. Back then, he used to look at me as if his whole world consisted of only me. I once believed love would protect us from every storm, but love could not stop someone from opening the back door and bringing perfume into my kitchen. I pulled out a chair and sat down, opening the small notebook I always kept in the drawer. Instead of jotting a grocery list or shift schedule, I wrote the first line, September 21st, 6:12 a.m., strange perfume, glass of red wine, lipstick stain, kitchen towel, long chestnut hair. Each word felt nailed to the page. A report to myself, so that tomorrow, if Tom said you imagined it, I would still have my own evidence. Sitting there, I felt one truth. Silence can be louder than shouting. I hadn't said anything to my daughter, nor had I called Ruth. I just wrote, so I wouldn't lose the sense that I still held the truth in my hands. Outside the window, the sun had risen, pouring warm golden light across the kitchen. The rays touched the towel on the table, making the chestnut hair glisten like a taut thread stretched across the room. It reminded me that some things cannot be brushed away, no matter how much someone denies them. I drew in a long breath and closed the notebook. Inside me, waves of suspicion had already begun to rise, and I knew this was only the beginning. There are days when the signs of truth show themselves so clearly I don't even have to look. They simply walk into my house. That afternoon, I had the early shift and came home around 4:30. The late sun stretched long across the oak-lined street, the breeze brushing my cheeks with the first chill of autumn. As I stepped into the yard, I heard laughter, familiar yet foreign. Tom's voice mingled with a woman's, brighter, sharper, laced with a kind of confidence that felt excessive. I pushed the door open. In the living room, Tom was pointing at interior design plans on his laptop. Sitting across from him on the sofa was a woman I had never met, but whose name I somehow felt I already knew: Vanessa Reed. Chestnut hair flowed over her shoulders, glossy in the afternoon light, her eyes sharp with eyeliner, as if always ready for a magazine ad. "Ah, Grace." Tom stood quickly, his voice a little forced. "This is Vanessa, my colleague. She just stopped by to go over some design work." Vanessa rose, extending her hand, her smile edged with precision. "Hello, Grace. I've heard Tom mention you often." I shook her hand. Her palm was cool, but her grip so firm it made me feel like I was the guest in my own house. "Just back from a night shift?" Vanessa asked, glancing at my nurse's uniform, still carrying the scent of antiseptic. "Must be exhausting." She said it in a tone both polite and detached, as though she already knew my schedule by heart. Before I could answer, she turned and walked straight into the kitchen. My chest tightened as I watched her open the cupboard and take out a glass, without the slightest hesitation, as if she'd done it many times before. "You knew where the glasses were?" I asked, my voice calm on the surface, trembling underneath. Vanessa turned her head, her smile widening. "Tom told me to make myself at home. Besides, don't most people keep glasses in the cupboard above the sink?" I guessed right. Her reply was light as air, but each word stabbed like a needle. This stranger knew my kitchen well enough not to search. The kitchen I had spent years arranging. Plates to the left, spices on the top shelf, dish towels folded neatly in the bottom drawer. All of it now used with ease by someone else. Tom jumped in, his tone strained with forced normalcy. "I just told her to feel comfortable, Grace. That's all." I looked at him and remembered an evening years ago when Jake was still little. He was 6, just home from school, fumbling to open the kitchen cupboard for a cup of water. He struggled, knocking over a stack of plastic plates. I laughed, then showed him each drawer, teaching him that in this house, everything had its place. Its place. And now, this woman walked in and confidently reached for the very glass with the whale print Emma loved. "Would you like some too?" Vanessa asked, pouring water into her glass. I pressed my lips into a smile. "No, I'm used to pouring my own." Tom cleared his throat, eager to redirect the moment back to his laptop. "Look here, Grace." Vanessa suggested, replacing the living room floor with lighter wood. "See how this color scheme works?" I looked at the screen, but all I could see was Vanessa sitting next to my husband, legs crossed, her posture relaxed as though she were the mistress of this house. Inside me, a wave of suspicion rose. All the traces from that morning, the perfume, the lipstick mark, the chestnut hair now stood before me in flesh and bone. And this woman was using her confidence as proof that she knew far too much about my home. I sat down in the corner chair, pretending to listen to the talk about color palettes. Tom spoke at length, scrolling through images on the laptop, but I noticed. Not once did he meet my eyes. Each time I looked at him, he quickly turned to Vanessa or lowered his gaze to the keyboard. Those eyes, once my refuge, now avoided me like a guilty man terrified of being caught. Vanessa, on the other hand, showed no hint of hesitation. She set her glass on the coffee table, leaned back, and casually stroked a strand of chestnut hair. Her demeanor wasn't that of a colleague dropping by, but of someone who already belonged in the room. She laughed at Tom's dull work story, her sharp laughter ringing against the walls of my home as though to stake her claim. Grace, what do you think? Vanessa turned toward me, her eyes glinting. A lighter wood floor would make the living room look so much more spacious and warm. We women are sensitive to spaces, aren't we? I smiled faintly. I work night shifts as a nurse. I'm used to cold white lights and hospital floors. This home already feels warm enough to me. The air froze for a beat. Tom jumped in quickly. I was just asking for an opinion. Nothing serious. I watched him. Every movement of his today was different. When he held his glass, his fingers trembled slightly. When Vanessa spoke, he smiled, but it was forced, lacking ease. And most of all, he avoided my gaze. Marriage had taught me one lesson: that the eyes are the most loyal traitors. They never learn to lie. I leaned back, and memories I hadn't summoned flooded in. 10 years ago, Tom took me to a company party. A young colleague sat near him, telling jokes. His eyes lit up as he listened, and I saw it so clearly, the sparkle. That night I asked him, "Did you find her attractive?" Tom laughed, wrapped his arm around me. "You're imagining things. You're the one I love." I believed him. I wanted to believe him. But today, his evasive eyes left me nothing to believe in. Vanessa rose, strolling leisurely around the living room. She stopped at the wooden shelf where I had arranged books, family photos, and souvenirs from trips. Her slender fingers glided across the frames, as if browsing items in a store. "Oh," her voice lifted, louder than before. "Is this your wedding photo?" I looked up. Yes, the large silver-framed photo. Tom and me beneath an arch of white roses, hand in hand, our smiles unmarked by cracks. I remembered that day vividly. The warmth of June, the cheers of friends, Tom leaning in to whisper, "It will always be like this, Grace. I promise." Vanessa tilted her head, her smile half mocking, half admiring. "Beautiful. You look perfect in white." And Tom, he looks so dashing. I didn't answer. I looked at Tom. He glanced at the photo too, but only for an instant. Then he turned away, quickly, abruptly, like a man who had touched a burn. That avoidance clenched my heart. The wedding photo, once a symbol of beginning, had turned into evidence that unsettled him. In that moment, I understood. Vanessa knew too much. She knew how to find a glass, knew the layout of my home, knew how to make Tom avert his gaze from his own past. And I, the wife sitting in my own house, was left as nothing more than a witness abandoned at the scene. Since the day Vanessa appeared in my house, I noticed Tom had begun using a different tactic, turning truth into illusion in my eyes. "You're imagining things again, Grace," he would often say, his voice tinged with both pity and irritation. "There's nothing. You're just being overly suspicious." At first, I pushed back. I saw it with my own eyes. "Tom." She opened the exact cupboard for a glass. "How could a stranger know that?" He smirked and sighed, as if I were a difficult patient. "You've been on too many night shifts. You're exhausted, maybe even paranoid. Smart people get confused sometimes. You need more rest." I stood there, hearing each word fall, feeling as though I were being pushed out of my own home. He didn't deny directly. Instead, he turned my experience into something blurry, irrational. Once, I brought up the kitchen towel. "That hair wasn't mine, and it wasn't Emma's." "Explain it." Tom leaned back in his chair and gave a short laugh. "A single hair? God, Grace, are you turning into a detective in your own house? Guests leave hair behind sometimes. You can interpret it however you like." The way he used the word interpret shook me. For years I'd been trained to read the smallest details in my patients' Pale skin, rapid breathing, a faint bruise. All of it was concrete truth, not speculation. But here, when I applied the same attentiveness to my own family, it was branded as delusion. Those nights I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking of my mother. She once told me, if the day comes when you wonder whether you're going mad, it means someone is manipulating you. Her words echoed louder in my mind than the ceiling fan above me. I decided to do something small but vital. Write everything down in the kitchen drawer. I kept a black notebook. The first page already held. September 21st, 6:12 a.m. Strange perfume. Wine glass. Lipstick stain. Kitchen towel. Chestnut hair. On the next page I wrote, September 23rd. Vanessa at the house. Took glass from cupboard. Tom avoided eye contact. By September 25th, I added, perfume smell in the upstairs hallway. Emma said she smelled it too, but Tom claimed it was just a scented candle. Each line became a marker to keep me from drifting into the fog Tom was trying to build. Because gaslighting, I didn't yet call it by name, but I felt it was a way to make me doubt my own senses. One evening, as I was writing in my journal, Tom walked into the kitchen. He looked at the notebook, frowned. What's this? A journal, I answered curtly. What kind of journal writes details like a police report? Grace, you're turning small things into a crime script. Do you know how ridiculous that sounds? I closed the notebook, holding it tightly in both hands. Ridiculous or not, at least it helps me remember exactly. I don't want to let myself forget. His eyes darkened for a moment. Then he laughed a hollow, empty laugh. Fine, keep writing. Someday Emma will read it and think her mother's obsessed. He left, leaving me alone with the notebook. My hands trembled, but the words I wrote grew steadier. I knew that if I didn't keep a record, I would start to doubt myself, and that was exactly what he wanted. I sat there, the kitchen light casting its glow across the page. In my mind a voice rose. Grace, hold on to the truth. Even if only in trembling lines. It was the anchor to keep the ship from drifting away. That night, when Tom went out under the pretense of meeting clients, I stayed in the kitchen, my hand resting on the black-covered notebook. I looked at my own words, the ink still fresh, and felt as though I'd built a fragile fence to stand against an invisible storm. I thought of my mother, years ago, when she lay on the narrow bed in that old hospital room. The weak yellow light falling across her gaunt face, she held my hand. She had whispered, Grace, remember this. If one day you have to ask yourself whether you're crazy, it means someone is trying to make you doubt the truth. And in that moment, you must trust your instincts more than ever. Back then I thought she was just comforting me after a silly argument with Tom. Some trivial thing like forgetting an anniversary. But now, every word she'd said rang in my head, clear as a bell tolling in an empty church. Tom was trying to make me question myself. Each you're imagining it was a small blade, slicing away my trust in my own memory and senses. And if I surrendered, I would truly lose myself in the maze he had built. I began watching more closely. The little details don't lie. A woman's coat mistakenly hanging in the laundry closet. A trace of perfume on a sofa pillow, a pizza box in the trash that no one in my house had ordered. All of it went into the notebook. One morning, while Emma was eating her cereal, she wrinkled her nose. Mom, our house smells weird. It's not like the scented candles. I held myself back and smiled faintly. Maybe I'm imagining it. But inside, I thanked heaven that at least Emma's sense of smell was still intact, still untouched by doubt. That night Tom came home late. Where were you? I asked. Meeting a client, he answered quickly, tossing his jacket onto the chair. Was Vanessa there? I asked, eyes fixed on him. He paused, then gave a short laugh. You're at it again. Grace, I'm honestly worried about you. You're so obsessed you're turning every woman at my firm into an affair? I turned away, saying nothing. I knew any word out of my mouth would be twisted. used as proof of my paranoia. Instead, I leaned quietly on another witness, the doorbell camera Jake had installed last year to protect me when I came home late from night shifts. So you feel safer, and if anything happens, you can check it, Jake had said. Back then I'd dismissed it as a piece of unnecessary tech. Now it had become my lifeline. I opened the app on my phone, scrolling through old clips, deliveries, neighborhood kids running past. My heart raced when I reached yesterday afternoon's footage. On the screen, clear as day, a woman walking up the steps, long chestnut hair falling over her shoulders. She didn't ring the bell. She took a key from her handbag, bent down, and unlocked my back door with practiced ease. The door swung open. She stepped inside with the casual gait of someone who owned the place. I set the phone down on the table, my hand cold as ice. Every suspicion, every lipstick mark, every strange scent now had flesh and blood proof. No more imagination, no more delusions. The camera had spoken for me, and I knew the gaslighting game Tom had built had just been shattered by a tiny doorbell camera. That night, my shift ended earlier than usual. A critical patient had been transferred to another ward, leaving my workload suddenly lighter. As I changed clothes, the clock showed just before 11. I decided to go home instead of staying in the break room as I usually did. Outside, the night air was biting, the hospital corridor funneling antiseptic smells all the way to the parking lot. The road home was eerily empty. Streetlights cast a yellow glow onto pavement damp with mist. I rolled the window halfway down, breathing in the damp night. Thinking of my house should have brought relief, but instead a strange feeling crept over me, unease. By the time I parked in the garage, the clock read 12:07. I unlocked the back door, turning the key carefully so the hinges wouldn't squeak. But as soon as I stepped in, I froze. The house wasn't shrouded in darkness as it always was. A faint yellow glow spilled from upstairs from my and Tom's bedroom. I stopped at the foot of the stairs. The house was unnervingly still, the lone light above proof that someone was awake. My heart pounded hard, equal parts racing and sinking. I was used to a dark bedroom, Tom already asleep after a long day, and me slipping quietly under the covers. But tonight, that unexpected light felt like a sign I never wanted. I climbed each step slowly, my hand gripping the wooden railing. Every step stretched on forever, my heartbeat thudding in my ears like a drum roll. As I neared the top, I heard a faint movement, fabric rustling, a soft footstep on the floor. The bedroom door was ajar, a strip of light cutting across the hallway. I stood still for a beat, my hand trembling on the doorknob. In that instant, my mother's voice echoed in my head. If one day you doubt, that's the very moment you must trust your instincts. I drew a deep breath and pushed the door open. Light flooded out, blinding me, and the sight before me left me frozen. Tom sat on the bed, shirt unbuttoned, hair disheveled, his face contorted with the shock of being caught. His eyes went wide, scrambling for an explanation, but only stammered, "Grace, you're home early?" The air in the room was heavy, suffocating. I stood in the doorway, my palms cold, my whole body numb. My instincts were no longer whispers, they were screaming that what I'd feared all along had finally come true. Before I could breathe, my eyes caught a movement in the corner. Beside the window, the long cream curtain stirred as if touched. I narrowed my eyes. A chestnut-colored hem peeked out, fabric shimmering under the bedside lamp. My breath hitched. My heart slammed against my throat. I heard blood rushing in my ears as I tried to keep my voice steady. "Who is in here?" Tom jumped up, stepping quickly off the bed, both hands raised as if to block my view. "There's no one," he said, his voice stiff and dry, like rotting wood. I stepped back, then fixed my gaze on the curtain. My whole body trembled, not with fear anymore, but with a seething fury. All those nights of doubt, all the times I was told I was imagining things, now converged into a single point. "Tom?" My voice was low, strangled, Stop lying. He spread his arms, stammering. Grace, let me explain. You're tired, you're imagining. I didn't let him finish. In a sudden motion, I lunged forward, seized the edge of the curtain, and yanked it hard. The fabric fell aside with a thud, and there's Vanessa. Her face was ashen, eyes wide, chestnut hair in disarray, both hands clutching the hem of her dress like a child caught stealing. For a few seconds, the three of us stood frozen, the room echoing only with ragged breaths. It felt as though I was standing outside my own life, a spectator to a wretched play. I looked at Vanessa, then at Tom, his head bowed, his eyes refusing to meet mine, his whole face flushed, whether from shame or anger. I couldn't tell. My voice shook so hard it barely sounded like mine. This is how you treat me after 30 years of marriage. Tom opened his mouth, but nothing came out except fractured silence. Vanessa swallowed, then murmured, Grace, I'm sorry. I let out a bitter laugh, sharp and hollow. Sorry? You walk into my house, into my bed, and now you stand there saying sorry. I took a slow step back, my hands icy cold, but my mind clearer than it had ever been. Memories flickered before me. Our wedding beneath the arch of white roses. Tom cradling newborn Emma in his arms. The day we sent Jake off to the military. All of it now eclipsed by the scene before me, a scene I would never forget. I raised my left hand, staring at the wedding ring on my fourth finger. A plain gold band, worn smooth after thousands of days washing dishes, doing laundry, tending patients, raising children. I remembered the day Tom slid it onto my finger, promising, I will never let you be alone. And now, that promise lay shattered. Without warning, I slipped the ring off. The emptiness on my finger ached like an open wound. I clenched the band in my palm, then hurled it to the floor. The metallic clang against the wood rang sharp, echoing. The ring rolled, until it stopped right at the tip of Vanessa's high-heeled shoe. She looked down, her lips trembling. Tom stood paralyzed, neither stepping forward nor bending down, as if that single clatter had frozen him in place. I looked at them both, my throat tight but my eyes blazing clearer than ever, because I knew that moment was the boundary between me and the past, between truth and the lies. I don't remember how I ended up on the sofa. I only remember that after the wedding ring rolled to Vanessa's feet, all the strength drained out of me. I walked out of the bedroom, leaving Tom and her standing like statues, and groped my way down the stairs. The living room lay in darkness, lit only by the faint yellow glow from the kitchen. I sank onto the sofa, my head spinning. My whole body felt as if it were being dragged under deep water. I pressed a trembling hand to my forehead but couldn't steady it. The clock ticked on the wall, each beat like a hammer. He betrayed you. He betrayed you. I bit my lip, tasting the salt of blood, trying to hold back tears and failing. The door clicked open. I jerked my head up. Jake walked in first, his firefighter's uniform still smelling of smoke. Emma followed close behind, clutching her bag, hair tied hastily. Mom? Emma cried out. Oh my God, what happened? Jake was already at my side, kneeling before me. Mom, what's wrong? Are you hurt? I wanted to tell them I was fine, that it was all a misunderstanding, but my throat locked. Only sobs came out. Tears blurred Jake's anxious face. He gripped my shoulders. Mom, tell me, what did Dad do? Where is he? I shook my head. But even that tiny gesture poured fuel onto the fire burning in Jake's eyes. He sprang up, fists clenched. I'll find him, he said, his voice booming like fire cracking in the night. I'll make him see what he's done. Jake, no. Emma rushed forward, grabbing her brother's arm. Calm down. Calm down? You see Mom like this and you tell me to calm down? Jake roared, eyes bloodshot. He betrayed her. I'm going to. Emma clutched his arm tighter, tears streaming down her cheeks too. If you explode, you'll only hurt her more. Look at Mom, Jake. She needs us here, not a fight out there. I held my head in my hands as my two children argued in front of me, their voices overlapping like two blades slicing into the same wound. I wanted to shout at them to stop, but what came out was a sob. Emma looked at me, then let go of her brother's arm. She dropped to her knees and wrapped me in her arms. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm here now. I clung to my daughter, feeling her shoulders tremble. Her warmth broke something loose inside me, and I began to cry out loud the deep, shuddering sobs I had been holding back for months. Jake stood nearby, his hands trembling, staring at me with the helplessness of a hero unable to save in that moment. I saw my family breaking apart in a way I had never imagined. The man I had trusted for 30 years had set fire to this house, and only my children, my own flesh and blood, remained as the pillars keeping me from collapsing. Emma still held me tight, her face buried in my shoulder, wet with tears. Her breath trembled against me like a string pulled to taut. I stroked her hair gently, my hand weak but still trying to soothe. Jake paced in front of the coffee table, his shoulders rigid. He was like a caged tiger, each footstep thudding against the floor. I knew he only wanted to run out and find Tom, to solve everything with strength and the fury boiling in his blood. I can't stand this, Jake growled, his eyes bloodshot. He left you like this? And then he stopped, not finishing. But I understood. Jake. My voice was hoarse, weaker than ever, but enough to make him pause. Don't. He turned to me, his arms falling slack as if all his strength had drained away. Mom, you can't just let this go. I shook my head slightly. You don't understand. Some battles can't be won with fists. Emma lifted her head, eyes blurred with tears but steady. Mom's right. Our job is to protect her, not hurt her more. Jake turned away, clenching his fists. I could see the muscles in his arms twitching, frustration compressed into a hot coal in his chest. My heart ached. My son, the one who once carried me on his shoulders at his firefighter graduation, was now powerless. Watching his mother crumble, I sat quietly, my gaze drifting over my two children. In that moment, memories flooded back. The day Jake took his first steps, me kneeling with my arms open. The day Emma took her college entrance exams, me waiting outside the hall for her relieved smile. So many years of being a mother had taught me to shield them, but tonight, they were the ones trying to shield me. I exhaled slowly, the breath pulling the last strength from my body. I knew there were truths, however cruel, that had to be spoken so none of us would keep living in illusions. I leaned close, whispering into Emma's ear but loud enough for Jake to hear. Your father has chosen someone who isn't me. The words came out ragged but so clear the whole room seemed to fall silent. Emma hugged me tighter, her sobs breaking into audible cries. Jake froze, eyes wide, then slowly bent down, his hands braced on his knees. I saw his shoulders trembling, whether from rage or from tears he refused to show. I couldn't tell. In that moment, I understood our family had crossed a line from which there was no return. The house, the walls, even the sofa I sat on, all still stood. But the foundation of love that had once held us up had collapsed, and from here on, I knew I had to learn how to stand up, not just for myself, but for the two children holding onto me in this darkness. The next morning, I was still on the sofa, my eyes ringed with shadows after a sleepless night. Jake had gone back to the fire station, and Emma was asleep in her room. The house was unnervingly quiet, just me, and the gaping void no one could fill. A knock came at the door. I opened it to find Ruth, my neighbor and longtime friend, holding a loaf of warm bread still fragrant with butter. She took one look at me, her eyes immediately pausing on my exhausted face. Grace, she said softly, her voice warm and steady. I heard something happened. I wanted to check on you. I invited her in. We sat in the kitchen, the bread untouched between us. I told her everything, my voice hoarse, my hands twisting a tissue to shreds. Ruth listened carefully, nodding now and then, her eyes reflecting both empathy and fury. "Cheaters never stay hidden for long," Ruth said, placing her hand over mine, gripping tight. "But we need to know exactly what he's done before you can decide your next steps." It was Ruth who suggested it. "Grace, you need to check the papers. The house, the accounts, everything. When a man puts one foot outside the marriage, he often finds a way to pull the money with him. Don't wait until you no longer have a place in your own home." Her words chilled me. I stood and opened the wooden cabinet drawer, pulling out the stack of financial papers I had always dismissed as dull contracts. We spread them out on the table, page by page, as we flipped through. My eyes caught on a thick folder. On top were unfamiliar numbers, a withdrawal against the mortgage on our house. The date was cleared just a few weeks ago. My hands shook. "Oh God, Ruth, he pulled equity from this house, and I didn't know a thing." Ruth gripped my shoulder. "Do you see now? He's already making preparations." "Grace, this isn't just about love anymore. This is about your survival and your children's." I collapsed into a chair. For years I had trusted Tom to handle all the finances while I worked shifts and raised the children. Yet here was the proof, showing he had quietly torn away the very foundation of our family. After a long silence, I stood and pulled out a blank sheet of paper and a thick marker. In bold, shaky but unyielding letters, I wrote, "No stranger is allowed to enter this house." I taped it firmly to the front door, pressing the edges down so hard the paper wrinkled. Staring at those words, I felt a flicker of control rise within me. If Tom tried to bring Vanessa back here, at least they would have to face my boundary. Ruth stood beside me, nodding. "That's right. You need limits, Grace. Otherwise, you'll be erased from your own home." I looked at the paper, my heart still heavy, but somewhere deep inside, a small flame had been lit. That afternoon, Tom came home. I heard his car stop in the garage, then the door slam hard. His footsteps thudded across the wooden floor like hammers striking my chest. Ruth still sat at the kitchen table, her eyes full of worry as she watched me. The front door burst open. Tom stepped in, his tie loosened, his face flushed as though from drink or a day spent choking back rage. And the moment he saw the paper I'd taped to the door, his eyes went dark. "What is this?" he roared, ripping the paper from the door. It tore down the middle, but I could still see my scrawled words. I stood straight, my voice trembling but clear. "This is my home. No one enters without my permission." Tom gave a dry, bitter laugh that made me shudder. He waved the paper in his hand like a flag. "Your home? Grace, wake up. This house is in my name. I'm the one paying the mortgage. I'm the owner. You think you get to write the rules here?" Ruth stepped forward, but I raised my hand to stop her. I wanted to face Tom myself, even though my knees were shaking. "You can sign papers, you can do things behind my back, but you cannot take away my right to live in this house with our children." Tom flung the paper down. The slap echoed like a whip crack. "You always play the victim. I've provided for this family for decades. That scrap of paper won't change the fact. The power is in my hands." My eyes burned, but I didn't cry. "Not this time." "Power? What about loyalty? What about the vow you made under the white roses on our wedding day? Do you remember, Tom?" He froze for a moment, then turned away, as if the words white roses were a knife I'd driven straight into him. Ruth folded her arms, her eyes sharp as a blade. "Tom Miller, you can argue with Grace, but you can't hide from the documents. I saw the withdrawal myself. You pulled equity behind her back, didn't you?" Tom spun around, glaring. "That's none of your business, Ruth. This is my family's matter." "Family?" I gave a hoarse laugh. "What family? When you let another woman into my house, into my bed, and then siphon money from the home we built. You call that family?" The air went tight. Tom clenched his fists, his eyes blazing, then turned sharply, grabbing the folder on the table. He muttered something, but all I caught was, "You'll regret this." I didn't answer. Instead, I bent down, picked up the crumpled paper, smoothed it out on the table, and taped it back onto the door with a fresh strip. My hand trembled, but each movement was deliberate. Tom stopped at the threshold, looking at me for a moment. His eyes were no longer those of the man I had once known, but of a stranger, someone preparing to fight me, not stand beside me. He spat one last line through his teeth. "This house is in my name." The door slammed, leaving me, Ruth, and the paper fluttering in the breeze of the air conditioner. I stood there, my heart pounding, but deep inside I understood. From now on, this fight would no longer be about love. It had reached the house itself, the ground beneath it, my place in my own life. The next day, I brought the stack of documents Ruth had helped me dig up to Harper's office. The room was small but bright, the smell of polished wood and fresh paper filling the air. Harper sat behind his desk, his thin-rimmed glasses catching the light, eyes sharp yet not unkind. "Mrs. Grace, please, sit down." He gently pulled out a chair for me. "I've reviewed the copies you sent last night. Today I'll explain them in more detail." I sat, my palms clammy, sweat pooling in my grip. Even at the hospital, facing patients on the brink of death, I had never felt my stomach twist like this. Harper opened the folder and pointed to a stamped document. "This is the power of attorney you signed 4 years ago, when Tom said it was just to simplify bank procedures. Do you remember?" My brow furrowed as a hazy memory returned. I recalled a rushed afternoon when Tom handed me a stack of papers, saying it was only a necessary signature so he could manage Emma's tuition payments. I had just come off a long shift, exhausted, and signed without reading carefully. Harper tapped his pen lightly on the paper. "With this, you gave Tom full authority over your joint assets. He can refinance, withdraw equity, or reassign ownership. And he has. Tom turned your marital home into a prioritized co-ownership where the beneficiary is not you." I stared at the printed words, my heart plummeting. "You mean he could sell the house without my consent?" "Not outright sell immediately," Harper replied calmly, "but he has placed the house at risk. And if the co-owner," he paused, flipping through more pages, "is someone he's romantically involved with, the consequences are even more complicated." My grip tightened on the chair. "That person is Vanessa?" Harper didn't answer right away. Instead, he slid a printed bank email across the desk. On it, in black and white, was a joint account under the names Tom Miller and Vanessa Reed. Below it, their electronic signatures stood with the bank's official seal. All sound drained from the room, leaving only the pounding of my heart. I had suspected the perfume, the lipstick mark, the chestnut hair. I had broken when I saw them together in my bedroom. But this lifeless sheet of paper cut deeper than any scene could. I trembled. "So, I've been betrayed not only in my bed, but also on legal paper?" Harper nodded slowly. "Grace, I know this is hard to accept, but the truth is he has not only broken the trust of marriage, he has also tried to put you at a disadvantage with the assets. However, there are ways to fight back. We'll need to prepare filings, and more importantly, you must keep calm." The words "keep calm" made me want to laugh bitterly. How could I stay calm when both my love and my home were being stripped from me? I remembered the day Tom and I bought this house. We were young then, standing hand in hand in the yard, looking up at the freshly painted roof and promising that this would be the place where our children would grow up. I'd thought the house was a symbol of commitment, of shared effort. I never imagined it would become a weapon of betrayal. I tore my eyes from the paperwork and looked at Harper. "You're right. I can't collapse. He's already pushed me out of his heart, but I won't let him push me out of this roof over my head." I left Harper's office as late afternoon turned the street outside a harsh gold. Inside me, it was darker than any night shift I'd ever worked. The file in my hands was neatly clipped, but it felt like a stone pressing on my chest. I sat in the car for a long moment before driving home. All my life I believed in integrity, believed that love and marriage were built on trust. And now I found myself both the woman betrayed in her own bedroom and the woman stripped of her rights in her own house. When I got home, Emma was in the kitchen. Her face brightened when she saw me. "Mom, are you okay? Have you eaten?" I tried to smile. "I'm okay, sweetheart. I just met with Mr. Harper." She put down her spoon and came closer. "What did he say?" I hesitated, then told her about the power of attorney, about the fine print I'd signed on a tired afternoon, and about the joint account with Vanessa. Emma's eyes widened, then filled with tears. "Mom, you've been through more than I realized." I held her hand, warm and steady. "It's all right, Emma. What matters is that I know now, and I won't let this happen again." That evening I sat at the kitchen table, opened the black notebook, and wrote down everything Harper had told me. I no longer wrote only about scents and lipstick stains. Now I wrote numbers, papers, evidence. I was turning my pain into something that could protect me. The house was silent that night. Tom hadn't come home. I didn't want him to. I locked the doors carefully, adding another note to the back door. This time in clear letters. "This door is for the Miller family only." Then I went upstairs and sat on the bed alone. The clock ticked its slow beats. I picked up my phone, scrolling through my inbox. My heart clenched at the sight of a new message. Sender, Vanessa Reed. I opened it, each word stabbing my eyes. "I'll be back tomorrow. The key is still here." Sweat dampened my palms. A wave of nausea rose in my throat. She hadn't only stepped into my marriage. She dared to stake her claim to my house, with the confidence of someone holding the trump card. I set the phone down, my vision blurring. In that moment, I understood. This was no longer a quiet war. This was an open challenge. And I, Grace Miller, the woman who had endured 30 years of marriage, long night shifts, and countless losses, would not stand still any longer. I didn't sleep at all after that message. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the chestnut hair on the kitchen towel, Tom's evasive glance, and the taunting line on my phone screen. "I'll be back tomorrow. The key is still here." So the next morning, instead of heading to an early shift, I called in. I wanted to stay. I wanted to face this. No more hiding, no more writing in my notebook and burying myself in silence. I sat in the kitchen from morning until noon, the room blazing with sunlight. The smell of coffee hung in the air but couldn't drown the tension tightening in my chest. My black notebook sat beside me like a talisman, a reminder that my memory had never been wrong. Near 2 o'clock, the sound of a key turning rang out. My heart clenched. The back door swung open, and, just as she had promised, Vanessa stepped inside. Her chestnut hair spilled over her shoulders. The sharp perfume flooded the kitchen instantly. In her hand she twirled a set of keys, as if walking into her own house. She startled for a fraction of a second at the sight of me sitting there, but quickly recovered. Her lips curved into a confident smile. "Oh, you're home. I thought you had a shift today." I gripped my coffee cup tighter, keeping my voice steady. "How did you open this door?" Vanessa shrugged and held up the key so the metal caught the light. "With a key? Why not?" I locked my eyes on hers. "Who gave it to you?" Her smile deepened, a little cruel. Her answer clipped as though meant to push me into a corner. "The real owner." It felt like someone squeezed my heart, but I refused to tremble. I rose, stepping slowly toward her. The window light fell full on Vanessa's face, highlighting the pale pink lipstick on her mouth, the very shade I'd once seen on the rim of a wine glass. "What right," I said slowly, "do you think you have to walk into this house? This kitchen, the home I built for my family?" Vanessa tilted her head, as if I were a naive child who needed explaining. "Tom gave me the key. He said I can come whenever I like. If you have a problem, maybe you should take it up with your husband, not me." Her words landed like a slap, ice cold. But I was ready. I remembered every line in my notebook, every silent wound carved into my heart. "You may have walked in," I said, my voice low but firm, But don't think I'll let you stay here unchallenged. Vanessa set the keys down on the counter, as if staking her claim. Her smile was sharp, cold. Grace, I don't want an argument. I'm here because of Tom. He gave me permission. If you're uncomfortable, maybe you should deal with your marriage instead of coming after me. I stood across from her, my hand resting on my phone, my heart pounding. Her words were a declaration that I was nothing more than an intruder in the very kitchen I had built. I drew a deep breath and dialed. My voice was steadier than ever as I spoke to the 911 dispatcher. Hello, this is Grace Miller. I'm reporting an unauthorized intruder in my home. She's in my kitchen right now, using a key I never gave her. In an instant, Vanessa's expression faltered. Her confidence wavered, her smile thinning. What are you doing? You can't. I cut her off, my gaze locked on hers. I can, and I am. This is my home, and I have the right to protect it. She stepped closer, her voice rising, a mix of rage and trembling. You're making a fool of yourself. When the police get here, Tom will confirm he gave me the key. Who do you think they'll believe? I stared her down. At the very least, there will be a record that you were here, and that's all I need. The minutes crawled. Vanessa paced the kitchen, gripping her handbag, her heels clicking against the tile. I stayed rooted in place, phone in hand, my eyes never leaving her. The silence pressed in, broken only by the ticking clock and the pounding drum of my own heart. Then a knock at the door. Vanessa flinched. Two local officers stepped inside, their gazes sharp, assessing. I explained concisely, showing them Vanessa's text message and the notice I had taped to the door. One officer turned to Vanessa. Ma'am, we'll need to document this. Do you have any paperwork proving your right to this residence? Color rushed into her cheeks. She stammered. Tom Miller. He gave me the key. He gave me permission. The officer took notes, then looked at me. Mrs. Grace, we've logged your report. If you'd like, you can file for a temporary restraining order. I nodded firmly. Yes, I would. Vanessa whipped her head toward me, her eyes blazing. You'll pay for this. Just then, the front door burst open. Tom stormed in, his face paling at the sight of police, Vanessa, and me standing tall across the kitchen. Then his features flared red. What the hell is going on here? He roared. One officer answered evenly. Sir, your wife reported an unauthorized entry. We're documenting the incident. Tom's eyes seared into me. Grace, how dare you humiliate me like this? I met his glare, my voice ironclad. I haven't humiliated anyone. I'm protecting my home. His fists clenched. His shout shook the room. I'll sue you for defamation. After the day the police stepped into my house, I knew I couldn't keep standing alone in this storm. The house was no longer a refuge. My children were too wounded to carry more, and friends like Ruth could only sit by my side for a few hours before returning to their own lives. So I went to see Pastor Daniel. The local church was small, gray-tiled roof, old brick walls, tucked quietly at the end of the street. I had attended Sunday service there for 20 years. But that day, as I pushed open the heavy wooden doors, my heart trembled like I was a first-time visitor. Daniel greeted me with a firm handshake. He was nearly 60, tall, silver streaks in his hair, his eyes gentle but deep, as though they had seen through many wandering souls. Grace, he said softly. I heard. Come, sit down. We chose a pew near the window. Light streamed through the stained glass, scattering patches of red and green across the floor. I sat with my hands clasped, unsure where to begin. I feel like I'm breaking into pieces. I whispered, not just because Tom betrayed me, but because I no longer recognized myself in this marriage. Daniel nodded slightly, patient. When someone hides behind lies, the cracks eventually show. But Grace, you must understand. That crack didn't begin today. His words struck me still. And then the memories came. Years ago, when my mother was dying, I practically lived in the hospital. I changed her bandages, bathed her, spoon-fed her porridge. Many nights I fell asleep on a plastic chair, the beeping of the heart monitor keeping time with my exhaustion. That was when Tom began to pull away. He rarely visited, always claiming work. When I called, his replies were curt. "You handle it. I'll send flowers." I remember one time, on my mother's birthday, I suggested the family visit her in the hospital to sing for her. Tom excused himself with client meetings and never came. I brushed it aside, telling myself he was just clumsy at showing care. But after that, he began coming home late more and more often. When I pressed him, he snapped, "You give everything to your mother. What do you expect from me?" I stayed silent. I had no strength left to argue. I poured myself into caring for Mom, hoping that when she was gone, everything would return to normal. But the truth was, from those days onward, the distance had already been carved. I just refused to see it. I turned back to Daniel, my voice cracking. Maybe the crack started then. When I needed him most, he left. And now, it's all shattered. Daniel placed his hand gently over mine, his voice steady and warm. "Grace, sometimes we don't notice the silent cracks until they widen into fractures. But knowing where it began, that's the first step to understanding you're not crazy, not delusional. You're only seeing the truth." I closed my eyes and drew in a deep breath. Inside me was pain, but also release. Because for the first time, I dared to name it. The real crack. Pastor Daniel listened to me for a long time without interrupting, without offering hollow advice. Only when I fell silent did he speak, his voice gentle yet firm. "Grace, forgiveness doesn't mean letting someone keep hurting you. Forgiveness is freeing your own heart from the weight of resentment. If you don't release it, you're the one wearing the chains." I frowned. "But how do you forgive someone who's destroyed everything?" "He didn't just betray me. He took away this home, the safety of my children." Daniel nodded slowly, patience in his gaze. "Yes, Tom betrayed you. You don't have to take him back. You don't have to let him keep walking into your life. But you do need to tell yourself, I forgive, not to set him free, but so I no longer imprison myself in sorrow." I sat in silence. His words rang like a bell, calming the storm inside me. All this time, I'd believed forgiveness meant weakness, meant leaving the door open for a betrayer to return. But now I understood. Forgiveness was an act for me, not for Tom. "Grace," Daniel continued, "you're stronger than you realize. You raised two wonderful children. You've cared for countless patients through long night shifts. Don't let one man make you forget your own worth." I inhaled deeply, and for the first time in days my chest loosened. Through the stained glass window, colored lights scattered across the floor. I thought of Jake and Emma, children who needed a steady mother, not a shattered shadow. I thought of Ruth, of the patients who once squeezed my hand in gratitude. I was still me, and no one could take that away. When I left the church, late afternoon had settled. The wind carried the scent of dry leaves, the soft chime of wind bells tinkling on porches. Inside me, a new resolve took root. I would not be the woman who only recorded wounds in a notebook. I would fight, and I would also learn to forgive, not for Tom, but for my own heart. That evening, as I set out a simple dinner with Emma, the phone rang. The caller ID read, "Harper." I picked up, and his voice came through, grave and deliberate. "Grace, I've uncovered something else. There's a hidden account. Tom has been transferring money into it regularly for months." My grip tightened on the phone. "The account. Whose name is on it?" A pause. Then Harper enunciated each word. "Vanessa Reed." The blood in my body turned cold. "Daniel's counsel from the morning, forgive, so you can be free," still echoed in my mind. But this revelation struck like a hammer blow. Not just betrayal in love, not just the power of attorney. Now even money, siphoned straight from my husband into his mistress's hands. I set the phone down on the table. Outside, wind rattled the glass panes. Inside me, a sharper resolve took shape. Forgiveness might free the heart, but truth must be dragged into the light, and I would not back down again. The courtroom smelled of old wood and paper, its morning air sharp and cold. I sat on the left side with Harper, my lawyer, my hands resting on my lap but trembling faintly. In front of me, a small black microphone sat like a curious eye, ready to expose every word we spoke. Tom entered, neat as ever in a gray suit, his tie perfectly aligned. He looked more like a successful businessman than an unfaithful husband. I stared at him and remembered, all these years, he'd always been skilled at performance for clients, for neighbors, and now, for the court. The judge, a silver-haired man, struck the gavel. Case, Grace Miller versus Tom Miller, concerning breach of marital duty. Petition for asset restrictions and limitations regarding a third party. Plaintiff, you may proceed. Harper rose, his voice steady and resonant. Your Honor, we will present evidence showing that Mr. Tom Miller gravely violated the marital covenant, bringing his mistress into the home, abusing power of attorney to refinance property without my client's knowledge. I felt each word thud against my chest. When the judge nodded, Tom stood as well. He cleared his throat, forcing a confident smile. Your Honor, he began, I want to clarify. My relationship with Grace is not as she describes. We had an unspoken agreement and open marriage. I did not betray her. I was living by the understanding we both accepted. The room stirred. I froze, then turned to Harper. He gave a subtle shake of the head, signaling me to stay silent. My mind exploded. Open marriage? That phrase had never once crossed our lips. In 30 years, I had endured. I had compromised, but I had never agreed to share my husband with another woman. He was fabricating an entire story to justify himself. The judge frowned. Mr. Miller, are you claiming there was consent to an open marriage? Tom nodded, his gaze steady, as though certainty alone could make lies true. Yes, Your Honor. Grace may not recall, but we have long had an implicit understanding that we gave each other a certain freedom. Harper shot to his feet, his tone cutting. Your Honor, my client has never consented to such an arrangement. We will present evidence to the contrary. That Mrs. Grace Miller has consistently objected to the presence of a third party in her home, even calling the police for her own protection. I clenched my fists, heat rising in me, equal parts rage and humiliation. Not the humiliation of his affair, I already knew that. The humiliation was that he dared to stand in court, before strangers, and call my marriage open, as though the love I had given for 30 years was nothing more than a cheap bargain. Inside me, a voice rang clear. Grace, this is why you are here today, not only to demand justice, but to reclaim the truth. I drew in a long, steady breath, forcing down the storm of rage in my chest. I wanted to rise, to shout at Tom that he was a liar, that there had never been any agreement. But Harper placed his hand on the table, his eyes signaling, let me handle this. He stood, walking to the lectern, his voice clear and deliberate. Your Honor, my client doesn't need to argue with words. We have evidence. From his folder, Harper produced a thick envelope and handed it to the clerk. A large screen flickered on. The faint clicking of the doorbell camera filled the room. I held my breath as the footage replayed the moment that had once left me shaking in my own kitchen. Vanessa, chestnut hair falling over her shoulders, pulling a key from her purse, leaning down to unlock the back door. The door swung open, and she stepped inside with practiced ease. The courtroom went silent. The judge leaned forward, eyes fixed on every frame. Harper continued. This recording is from September 23rd, at 2:07 p.m. My client was not home and never granted this woman a key. Yet Mr. Miller's mistress entered freely. Your Honor, that is not the mark of an open marriage. It is trespass. Tom shot up, his voice sharp. That was only because I gave her permission. Harper raised a hand, his expression calm but cutting. Please, sir, do not interrupt. I'm not finished. Alongside the video, here is a copy of the message my client received from Vanessa Reed. He held up a sheet of paper. Bold words stood stark on the page. I'll be back tomorrow. The key is still here. The air drained from the room. I sat frozen. My heart beat loud. But this time not from fear, from the raw sense that justice, at least in part, was finally being spoken aloud. Harper turned back to the bench. With this evidence, we urgently request a temporary order, barring Vanessa Reed from approaching or entering the Miller residence until this matter is resolved. My client and her children deserve safety in their own home. Tom tried to interject, his voice hoarse. Vanessa hasn't done anything wrong. Enough, Mr. Miller. The judge's hand lifted, his tone calm yet carrying the full weight of authority. The evidence is clear. Allowing a third-party access to the home without the consent of both spouses is a serious violation. His gaze pinned Tom, cold and unyielding. The court orders a temporary injunction. Vanessa Reed is prohibited from entering or approaching the Miller residence until final judgment. Any violation will carry legal consequences. I heard every word distinctly. Inside me, a knot loosened, not because I had one, but because I was no longer dismissed as delusional. At last, someone had seen the truth and acknowledged it. Tom slumped back into his seat. His face flushed crimson. I looked at him, but this time I didn't tremble. In that moment, I understood. My wounds were still deep, but I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my place in my own life. One weekend morning, just as I was setting breakfast on the table for Emma, a knock came at the door. The mailman stood outside, holding a large envelope. "Package for the Millers," he said, placing it down before walking away. I wiped my hands and bent to pick it up. The envelope bore a pale blue logo, the words printed across the top, "Maternal Wellness and Spa Care." I frowned. This was certainly not a service I had ever used. Carefully, I tore it open, my heartbeat stumbling. Inside was a detailed invoice, a premium maternity care package, massage therapy, nutrition plan, prenatal yoga classes, date of service, just last week, client name, Vanessa Reed, billing address, Tom Miller. The paper slipped from my hands onto the table, burning as if it were fire. The words screamed in my head, impossible to shut out. Maternity spa. Vanessa. Paid for by Tom. Emma wandered into the kitchen just then, her hair still mussed from sleep. "Mom, what came in the mail?" I hurriedly folded the invoice and slipped it into my robe pocket. "Nothing, just a mix-up," I said, forcing a smile, my voice trembling. She tilted her head, suspicious, but didn't press. She poured herself some milk and sat down. I watched her eat, my chest torn between two urges, to shout the truth to her, and to shield her from the weight of it. I stepped out to the porch and sank onto the steps, the paper still clenched in my fist. Memories rushed back: my pregnancy with Emma, and later, the loss of my third child when I was past 30. I remembered lying under the blinding hospital lights, the nurse whispering, "I'm sorry, we couldn't save the baby." Tom had sat beside me then, holding my hand, his palm cold. But only days later, he had returned to work, leaving me alone with a wound that never fully healed. That loss still lived in me, raw and silent. And now, in my hands, lay a receipt for maternity care belonging to the woman who had invaded my marriage. Old pain and new collided, drowning me like twin waves in deep water. I pulled out my phone, dialing Harper's number, but froze before pressing call. I didn't know why I reached for him. Was it to file another claim? To add new evidence? Or just to hear someone confirm that I wasn't crazy, that what I was holding was real? I sat there for a long time, the morning breeze slipping through my hair, carrying the rustle of leaves. Only one unanswered question filled me. Was this the final line I had to bear? Or was there still more I would be forced to witness? That night, I couldn't sleep. The folded invoice lay on my nightstand like a blade hidden in the dark. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw again the harsh white light of that emergency room years ago. In my dream, I lay on the hospital bed, my hands covered in blood, my stomach twisting in agony. The monitor beeped steadily, then stopped all at once. A nurse placed her hand on my shoulder and whispered the sentence that has haunted me all my life. "I'm sorry, we couldn't save the baby." I jolted awake, cold sweat soaking through my back. My heart raced, my mouth dry. My hands clutched my empty belly as if the old wound had torn open again. I walked down to the kitchen and flicked on the soft yellow light. It fell on the invoice I had shoved into a drawer, now waiting for me to face it. I pulled it out and read every line. Under service package, the words stood clear. Pregnancy care, 12 weeks. My hands shook violently. My head spun. Vanessa is pregnant. Not just a mistress, not just the intruder in my home, but carrying a new life, a child Tom will call his own. A chair scraped behind me. Emma appeared, hair loose, eyes heavy with sleep. "Mom, you're still awake." I tried to shove the paper back down, but Emma was quicker. She picked it up, her eyes scanning it, then froze. Her gaze turned to me, horrified. "Mom, is this true?" I couldn't answer. I sank into the chair, my face in my hands. Hot tears spilled through my fingers. Emma set the paper down, knelt beside me, and wrapped her arms around me. "I'm sorry, Mom. I wish I could carry some of this for you. But Mom," her voice broke, "we need to be certain. We can't rely on just one invoice." The next day, Harper confirmed it. He called after checking the records from the clinic partnered with that spa. His voice was steady, but every word cut like a blade. "Grace, I verified. Vanessa Reed is pregnant 12 weeks, according to the file." I sat frozen. The phone pressed to my ear as the room spun around me. All the old pain came rushing back, the baby I lost, the empty months that followed, and now, the image of another woman carrying my husband's child. I dropped my head onto the table and whispered into the dark. So, everything has truly collapsed. The sky had darkened since late afternoon. Clouds rolled and twisted. The wind howled through the oaks in the backyard, branches hammering against the windows. Emma and I sat in the living room, the lamp flickering uneasily as if warning of an ominous night. I had just set the teapot on the table when the familiar roar of an engine rose outside the garage. Headlights swept across the window, then cut out. The door slammed open, wind rushing in, and Tom staggered inside. The smell of alcohol reached us before he even spoke. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie hanging loose. His hair was a mess, his eyes bloodshot, half drunk, half wild. "Grace." His voice dragged, low and hoarse, like someone who'd been shouting all night. "We need to talk." Emma shot to her feet, but I raised my hand to signal her back. I looked at Tom, my gaze no longer trembling. "Why are you here now?" He lurched forward, steadying himself on the arm of a chair. "To explain, to tell you. I don't want to lose everything." Outside, the wind screamed louder. The door banged against the frame with a heavy thud. Shadows of swaying trees danced across the wall. "What's left to explain?" My voice was low. "I've seen everything. I've heard everything. And I've had enough." He shook his head, damp hair falling over his forehead. "No, Grace. You don't understand. I just lost my way. But you're still." He slumped into a chair, lifting his face into a crooked smile. "The only one I need." A flash of lightning split the sky, slicing across the window, followed by thunder slamming down on the roof. The lights flickered, then died. The whole house sank into thick darkness. Emma gasped softly. I reached for the box of candles on the shelf in the flickering glow. Tom's face emerged like a warped mask, half lit, half lost in shadow. He took a step closer, his voice breaking. "Give me a chance, Grace." I held the candle tight, hearing the rain begin to lash against the glass, my heart pounding. This was no ordinary talk. This was a reckoning, the storm outside mirroring the one raging inside our house. In the unsteady light, the room seemed to breathe with each gust of wind. Tom stood before me, red-rimmed eyes, hot alcohol breath spilling over. His hand touched the chair, his voice pleading. "Grace, I know I've done wrong, but you have to understand, I'm only human. Everyone stumbles. You've been my wife for 30 years. You can't erase everything over one mistake." I gripped the candle so hard the flame shivered, throwing his face into sharper relief. All the anger I'd been holding back flared at once. I shouted, my voice cutting through thunder. "One mistake? You dare call it a mistake?" I saw it with my own eyes. Tom, I heard her laughter in that room, on the very bed we once called our home. Tom stumbled back, his lips trembling. He opened his mouth to protest, but I didn't let him. "You didn't just betray me with your body, but with your lies. You gave her the key to walk into my kitchen, into my bedroom, while I was pushed aside like a stranger. Don't you dare call this a stumble. This was a choice." Outside, the wind howled long and high, rain slashing furiously against the windows. Emma stood frozen at the foot of the stairs, arms wrapped around her chest, eyes wide with terror as she watched us, too afraid to step in. Tom clutched his head, shouting, I don't want to lose you, Grace. I just needed a way out. A way out." I let out a bitter laugh, my voice cracking but sharp as a blade. "And what about me? Where was I all those years you turned your back? I carried my dying mother. I carried our children. I carried this entire house, while you were busy finding your escape in another woman's arms. Is that your idea of marriage?" Lightning flashed again, flooding the room in a burst of white before plunging it back into darkness. For a brief instant, I saw Tom's face clearly ruined, distorted. Like a man who no longer knew where he stood, he staggered backward, his foot catching on the rug beneath the table. In his drunken haze and the suffocating dark, he lost his balance, hands flailing for the wall. Instead of steadying himself, his palms struck the wedding photo hanging on the shelf. The frame crashed to the floor, glass shattering with a sharp crack that cut through even the roar of the storm outside. I froze, staring at the shards scattered across the floor. Our wedding portrait lay torn at the corner, the two young faces once full of hope now severed by a jagged line of broken glass. Tom collapsed onto the floor, wide-eyed, gasping for breath, and my heart clenched, but strangely, I no longer trembled. Amid the thunder's relentless rumble, I understood. This was the moment that closed a chapter beyond repair. The morning after the storm, I woke to an unusual kind of silence. No more thunder, no more howling wind, only soft sunlight pouring through the window. But inside the house, shards of glass still lay scattered across the floor, the remnants of the wedding frame, shattered the night before. I picked up each piece carefully, as if tending to a wound of my own. Every shard reflected a sliver of the young faces in that old photo, reminding me of the vows we'd once spoken beneath the arch of white roses. But now, those fragments could no longer be pieced together. I gathered them into a bag, like a small burial ritual. By afternoon, I called a locksmith. A middle-aged man arrived, toolbox in hand. "You want all the locks changed?" he asked. I nodded. "All of them. Front door, back door, garage. I want new keys entirely." As the drill whirred, my heart beat faster, not from fear, but from resolve. Each new lock was like sealing an old door, erasing the free access Tom and Vanessa once had. Later that day, I stood in the hallway, looking at the gleaming new locks, and felt a strange relief rise inside me. This was my house, and for the first time in months, it truly felt safe. The next day, I started painting the bedroom. Emma helped me spread the tarp and roll fresh cream-colored paint across the walls. The tang of paint mingled with the warm scent of basil from a candle I'd lit. As the roller swept over the old walls, I felt the strokes covering the hurt, too. The new paint brightened the room, made it feel airy. I remembered the cloying sweetness of Vanessa's perfume once clinging to the curtains, choking me each time I entered. But now, only the soft scent of basil floated through the air. That night, I sat on the freshly made bed and drew a long breath. This room had been the stage of betrayal, the place where I'd pulled off my wedding ring and hurled it to the floor. But now it felt like something else, a space I had chosen to reclaim for myself. I lit another basil candle. The warm glow climbed the newly painted walls. Closing my eyes, I whispered to myself, "This is my home, and I won't let anyone erase this scent again." Yet even after the locks were changed and the room repainted, a hollow space still remained inside me. The house was safer, the room smelled of herbs, but I still felt lost. I realized I had spent too many years as a nurse, a wife, a mother, and forgotten who Grace was beyond those roles. One morning, passing the community center, a flyer on the notice board caught my eye. Adult art classes, open your heart through color. I stood still for a long time, then tore off a slip with the phone number. The next day, I went to class. The small room smelled of oil paint mixed with wood. The instructor, a short-haired, silver-haired woman, handed me a set of brushes and a blank canvas. "No experience needed," she smiled. "Just let your hands say what your heart wants." I sat down, staring at the white space in front of me. At first, I was confused, not knowing where to start. But then, I remembered the storm that night, the lightning ripping across the sky, the thunder pounding down on the house, and the wedding photo frame shattering at Tom's feet. I dipped my brush into deep blue, painting fierce swirling strokes. Then I added yellow, red, purple, each color like a fragment of my soul torn apart, now trying to come back together. As the painting gradually took shape, I suddenly realized I was breathing more evenly. The heaviness in my chest eased. I wasn't painting to create a masterpiece. I was painting to find my own breath again. In the following sessions, I kept coming back. I painted the dawn after the storm, painted the oak tree in the backyard, painted Emma's arms holding me the night I collapsed. I even painted a kitchen with a cinnamon candle glowing in the dark, a symbolic image of the new trust I wanted to keep. Emma saw my painting hanging in the corner of the living room, and she was surprised. "Mom, it's beautiful. I didn't know you had talent." I smiled, lightly touching the wooden frame. "Not talent, darling. It's my heart learning how to speak again." One evening, as I was washing brushes, the phone rang. It was Harper. His voice was calm as always, but this time tinged with urgency. "Grace, I just received information from Tom's lawyer. He wants to negotiate." I put the brush down, my hand still smeared with red paint. My heart skipped a beat, then pounded furiously. After everything, the man who once stood in court justifying himself with the story of an open marriage was now the one reaching out. I wiped my hands, gripping the phone tighter. In my head, one sharp question echoed. Negotiation. But at what price? We met in a small room at a neutral law office, white walls, a long wooden table, the two of us sitting across from each other. Harper sat beside me, his steady gaze reassuring, his hands resting neatly on a thick stack of files. Across the table, Tom arrived with his lawyer. He wore a tidy suit, but his eyes carried weary lines. The past weeks had clearly etched themselves onto the face that once seemed so smooth and confident. The air was heavy. I could hear the tick of the wall clock marking each second, amplifying the weight of the distance between us. Tom's lawyer began smoothly. "Mr. Miller wishes to resolve this peacefully, to avoid further harm to either party. We'd like to hear Mrs. Grace's proposals first." I drew in a deep breath, keeping my back straight. For the first time in months, I no longer felt like the abandoned wife. I was a woman with the right to set the terms. I looked directly at Tom and spoke clearly. "My conditions come in 3 parts. First, I keep this house. This is where I've lived with our children, and I will not allow it to be stripped from me because of reckless decisions." Tom pressed his lips together, about to speak, but his lawyer touched his hand lightly, signaling him to remain silent. I went on. Second, all joint accounts must be separated. What belongs to me remains mine. What you built, you can keep, but I will not allow my money to continue flowing to another woman. Harper nodded, adding documents that proved my independent ownership of certain savings. I glanced at Tom. His face slackened briefly, then tightened again, as if forced to acknowledge what he didn't want to admit. Third, I paused, staring straight into those familiar eyes that now felt unbearably distant. You must take responsibility for the child Vanessa is carrying, but you are not allowed to touch my assets, or our children's, to support that child. If you want to be a father, then do it with your own money. The room fell silent. I could hear Harper's pen tapping a steady rhythm on the table. Tom leaned forward, his hand clenched, his voice low with a slight tremor. Grace, do you really want to cut things off like this? 30 years, reduced to a cold agreement? I swallowed hard, pain tightening in my chest, but my voice stayed firm. No, Tom, 30 years remain in my heart, but the rest of my life, I have to live for my own peace. The atmosphere in the room grew even heavier after I laid out my 3 conditions. Tom slumped back in his chair, rubbing his temples as though cornered to the point of suffocation. His lawyer cleared his throat, carefully choosing his words. We acknowledge Mrs. Grace's conditions, Tom's lawyer said evenly, but some points require consideration. Mr. Miller has a legal responsibility toward the other woman, and the child she is carrying. My fists tightened, nails nearly breaking skin. Harper placed his hand on my wrist, a silent signal to stay calm. He leaned forward, his voice sharp as steel. Fatherhood is the opposing party's responsibility, but that responsibility cannot come at the expense of Mrs. Grace's lawful property and rightful interests. We will fight to the end to protect this. Tom exhaled heavily, turning his gaze toward me. For a flicker of a moment, there was softness in his eyes, but then they hardened again. Grace, you have to understand, I can't abandon the baby. It's my blood too. My reply came out hoarse but steady. I'm not asking you to abandon it. I'm saying, do not take anything from me or our children to raise that baby. You chose this path, you bear it yourself. The air was taut, like a string stretched to breaking. And then, the door swung open. Vanessa walked in. She wore a fitted beige dress, chestnut hair cascading over her shoulders, one hand resting deliberately on her belly, emphasizing what was growing inside. Her smile was thin, sharp as a blade. Apologies for being late, Vanessa said, her voice crisp. But I believe you're discussing something directly concerning me and my child. Harper frowned. This meeting is between Mr. and Mrs. Miller and their legal counsel. Miss Reed, your presence is unnecessary. Vanessa let out a dry laugh. Oh, I'd say I'm more necessary than anyone here, because this child is a truth no one can deny, and it will carry the Miller name. The room froze. Tom snapped his head toward her, his voice rasping with alarm. Vanessa, as though trying to stop her too late, and me, my heart clenched hard. Her every word pierced like needles into my chest. Blood roared in my ears, but I sat upright, refusing to collapse. Vanessa placed her hand flat on the table, her eyes drilling straight into mine. Whether Mrs. Grace agrees or not, this child will bear the Miller name. That is a truth you cannot erase. I bit my lip until I tasted blood, but I never broke my stare. Deep inside, I knew the next battle would not just be about property, not just about the house, but about the name itself, a symbol of the family I had fought my whole life to hold together. After countless nights of torment, for the first time I woke without feeling my heart weighed down. Outside the window, the morning sunlight streamed through the curtains, spreading gold across the fresh bedsheet, gentle as a hand caressing me. Beyond, birds chirped to welcome the new day. The house that once echoed with arguments, with slamming doors, now held only tender silence. I put on my robe and walked down to the kitchen. On the table, a vase of dried cinnamon flowers released its fragrance, blending with the scent of coffee from the machine I had just turned on. This kitchen once reeked of a stranger's cloying perfume that made me dizzy, but now it carried only the familiar cinnamon scent, the fragrance I had chosen to erase every trace of the past. Jake was the first to come in, still in his firefighter uniform, tall and broad-shouldered. His eyes lit up when he saw me by the stove. "Mom, you look different today." I smiled, setting the wooden spoon down gently. "Different how, like?" "You're truly at peace," Jake said, then wrapped me in a tight embrace. Emma hurried down next, her hair hastily tied, a porcelain plate in hand. "Let me help, Mom. I'll cut the fruit." Together, we prepared breakfast. I flipped pancakes, Jake poured coffee, Emma sliced watermelon and apples into neat pieces. The sound of knife against board, the sizzle of oil in the pan, my children's laughter all blended into a simple melody I thought I had lost forever. "It's been so long since we had a breakfast like this," Emma whispered, her eyes shining. I nodded, my chest tight but warm. "Yes, and we'll have many more." After the meal, I brought out a new picture frame. Inside was a photo of the three of us standing on the porch, sunlight streaming down, a breeze lifting Emma's hair to one side. Jake's hand rested on my shoulder, while I held my daughter's hand. Just the three of us, but every smile was real, not forced. I hung the photo on the living room wall, right where the wedding portrait once was. The old frame had shattered with the storm, like a ritual of closure. This new picture was a beginning clean, filled with light. Stepping back, I gazed at it. Morning sunlight poured through the window, illuminating the photo, making it glow. In my eyes, it declared, family is not always complete, but as long as true love remains, family is still whole. Emma wrapped an arm around my shoulder and whispered, "This is the most beautiful picture of us." I placed my hand over my child's, and suddenly my heart felt lighter, because in that moment, I realized I was no longer standing in ruins. I had stepped into a true morning. I sat down on the chair in the living room, my eyes still fixed on the new picture hanging on the wall. In every detail, I saw the answer to the long, endless months I had struggled through. My marriage may have collapsed, my trust may have been betrayed, but I had not lost everything. I still had Jake and Emma, the two children who stand as proof of the love I once gave my all to. And more importantly, I still had myself. After years of being blurred by endurance, deceit, and pain, I whispered as if speaking to an imaginary friend, or perhaps to my own heart. Forgiveness is not about letting someone continue to hurt you. Forgiveness is about freeing your heart from the chains of resentment. I don't need to deny the past, but I will not let it swallow the future. I can still begin again from within this house, from the smiles of my children. A soft breeze slipped through the window crack, lifting the thin curtain into a gentle flutter. I stood, stepped forward, and flung the door wide open. Light poured in, flooding the entire room. In that instant, I felt as though the storm had truly passed, leaving behind a sky that was fresh and clear. Behind me, Jake and Emma burst into laughter over some spontaneous joke. Their laughter was bright, innocent, ringing through the house. I turned back, watching them no longer children, but grown adults. Yet in that moment, they were still the little ones, giving me a reason to go on. My lips curved upward. A smile, for the first time in so long. It wasn't forced, wasn't a mask, it came from deep within. The smile of a woman who had walked through the storm and found her dawn again. I closed my eyes, inhaled deeply. Happiness is never as whole as we dream it to be, but perhaps it is that very imperfection that forces us to grow stronger. That reminds us we can rise from the ruins, rebuild our lives with our own hands, and call it a new beginning. Outside, golden sunlight spread across the porch, warming each brick. Inside me, too, a sun was slowly rising, illuminating the path I would walk forward alone, but never lonely. My dear friends, If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to leave a comment and share your thoughts or your own experiences. And don't forget to subscribe so we can continue to listen, to tell, and to live through stories together, stories that may be yours, or perhaps someone you once knew.